Kicked out at 16 by my stepfather. My journey to overcome betrayal. When I was 10, my mom met Greg, the man who would become my stepdad. At first, he seemed great. Charming, helpful, and eager to step into the father role after my dad passed away. I was hesitant at first, but Greg won me over with small gestures, helping with homework, buying me ice cream, and cheering at my soccer games. For a while, it felt like we were a real family again, but cracks started to show soon after he moved in. Greg wasn't as patient as he seemed, and his temper often flared over small things. My mom dismissed it, saying, "He's just stressed." I tried to believe her. When I was 12, my mom and Greg had a baby, my half-sister Lily. I loved her instantly, but her arrival changed everything. Greg's attention shifted entirely to Lily, and I became more of an afterthought. His expectations for me grew harsher too. Suddenly, I was the lazy one, the troublemaker, even though I worked hard in school and helped around the house. "Why can't you be more responsible like Lily will be?" Greg would say. She was a baby. How could I compete? By the time I turned 15, Greg had taken control of every aspect of my life. He monitored my phone, dictated who I could hang out with, and gave me endless chores. If I dared to question him, he'd explode, calling me ungrateful and disrespectful. Mom rarely intervened. She seemed caught between wanting to defend me and keeping Greg happy. The more I tried to stand up for myself, the more isolated I felt. The day everything fell apart is burned into my memory. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I'd stayed late at school for a group project. When I got home, Greg was waiting for me, furious. "You're out past curfew," he yelled, even though it wasn't even dark yet. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. "You think you can just do whatever you want under my roof? You're done, kid." I didn't realize what he meant until he started throwing my things into garbage bags. Mom stood in the corner, silent and teary-eyed. I begged her to stop him, but she just said, "It's for the best." That night, at just 16 years old, I found myself standing on the sidewalk with 2 garbage bags of belongings and nowhere to go. I spent my first night sleeping at a bus stop. It was cold, and I was terrified. I kept expecting someone to come looking for me, but no one did. My phone was blowing up with messages from Greg, all variations of "you brought this on yourself" and "don't even think about coming back." The reality sank in. I was on my own. The next few days were a blur. I reached out to friends, but most of their parents were hesitant to take in a kid with family issues. Eventually, a friend's older brother directed me to a local shelter for teens. It was far from ideal. Crowded, noisy, and filled with people who had their own struggles. But it was better than the streets. At the shelter, I met a counselor named Carla. She was the first adult who actually listened to me without judgment. "You're stronger than you think," she told me. Those words stuck with me. Balancing school while living in a shelter was brutal. I'd wake up early to catch a bus, do my best to focus in class, and then rush back to the shelter before curfew. My grades started slipping, and some teachers noticed. When one of them, Mr. Ellis, asked if I was okay, I broke down and told him everything. He connected me with the school's social worker, who helped me navigate resources for housing and food. Slowly, I started to feel like I wasn't completely alone. At 17, I got my first job at a local diner. It wasn't glamorous, cleaning tables and washing dishes, but it gave me a sense of control over my life. The manager, Marcy, became something of a mentor. She'd let me take leftovers home and even gave me extra shifts when she knew I needed the money. With her encouragement, I started saving for my own place. It wasn't much, but it was a step toward independence. One day, after months of silence, I saw my mom in the grocery store. She looked shocked to see me, thinner and more worn than the kid she'd last seen. "I've been meaning to call you," she said awkwardly. "Why didn't you stop him?" I blurted out. All the anger and hurt I'd bottled up came pouring out. "You let him throw me out like I was nothing." Tears welled up in her eyes, but her excuses felt hollow. "I didn't know what to do," she said. I walked away, realizing she'd never be the mom I needed her to be. By the time I turned 18, I'd saved enough to rent a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, just a bed, a table, and a leaky faucet. But it was mine. Standing in that space, I felt a sense of pride I'd never known before. I'd survived, and I was finally free. With a stable place to live, I started focusing on my future. I enrolled in community college, determined to build a better life. Carla, my counselor from the shelter, wrote me a glowing recommendation, and Marcy helped me with tuition through a small scholarship she funded for employees. Bit by bit, I rebuilt myself. I made new friends, excelled in my classes, and even started volunteering at the shelter that had once been my refuge. Now, at 25, I've come a long way from the scared 16-year-old standing on the sidewalk with garbage bags. I have a degree, a steady job, and a support system I've built from scratch. As for Greg and my mom, I haven't spoken to Greg since that day, and my relationship with my mom remains distant. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who stand by you when the world falls apart. Looking back, I wouldn't wish my journey on anyone, but I'm proud of the person I've become. Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the brightest destinations.